Welcome to the Team EF Coaching Cycling Performance Podcast, where we take information from the highest level of sport and make it accessible for all cyclists. I'm your host, Zack Morris, and today I'm sitting down with the head sports director from EF Pro Cycling, Mr. Charly Wegelius. Charly, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Charly, we're sitting down in Girona. It's the kickoff camp for the year. This is the first time EF has ever had a men's and women's camp together in the same building. What are you seeing on your end? How are things going?
Yeah, it's obviously an expanded program. There's a lot of people here, 2 teams. I think it's a great thing that we're doing. And it's super to see everybody getting on so well and integrating and being part of the team that we are.
So I think a lot of people out there maybe don't have access to understanding all of the different roles that exist within a pro cycling team. So what does the head sports director do? What's your day-to-day?
Well, I'd say that, maybe in another sport we'd be called coaches. But in cycling, a coach is really one that's more deeply involved in the physical preparation, the day-to-day training. So the sports directors are, I'd say, more tactical orientated. So we're bringing the teams together at the races, dealing with the strategy, but also dealing with a lot of the peripheral stuff that the riders need to get done right away from the races that isn't just on the bike training. Typically, the sports directors have experience as former riders, but I don't think it's necessarily a must-do for the job.
Okay.
So my role in that is I am a sports director, but I'm also kind of coordinating that group.
Okay.
So I'm coordinating the sports directors group. I'm responsible for scheduling the riders so that the riders have the right race program for themselves with, appropriate goals, rest periods and so on, but also that the whole racing program works for the team and the team's goals so that the right riders basically pop up in the right places, hopefully ready.
So just to give the audience a little bit of a background on Charly, I suggest that you read Charly's book. You have a book? And
yeah, I suggest you buy it.
Yeah. So your book talks a lot about being kind of like the working man cyclist and really grinding out the career of being a pro rider and not really having everything handed to you along the way and having to fight for most of your opportunities. And it's my understanding that you make a lot of the really critical decisions in the team as far as things like who goes to the Tour de France and what that team composition looks like. So what do you think your experience as a rider, or what kind of impact do you think your experience as a rider has on how you play the current role you play today?
I think in general, typically you can say that a less successful rider can often make a more successful sports director. I think it's much easier for a rider who's struggled to understand that you can't just, ride up the side of the peloton, pass everybody and finish first. So I think that gives us a good empathy with what the riders go through, the ups and downs. Again, around selection, the kind of anxiety they can have and some of the insecurities about that. And I think also riding in that support role, even as a rider, you have to have a little bit of a broader view of what the team's doing rather than just focusing on your race. So in that role, you have to think already as a rider strategically and tactically. So I think that carries over quite well to this role.
I think it helps you manage the leaders as well. I'm sure you rode for good leaders and bad leaders, and you can probably help those leaders grow into better leaders, no matter where they stand, by giving them critical feedback as well.
Yeah, for sure. My father always worked with horses. I was around horses a lot when I was young. And the best horses were the hardest ones to handle. They didn't want to stand still and they didn't want to do this, and because they have a special character.
Right.
And I think that's true of like top level riders. And again, riding in a support role as a rider, you see that and you have to work with those characters to still get the results out. So I'd say it gives us a good perspective.
So what do you think about the team this year. I mean, we had some big changes in 2023. Everybody was super excited about the signing of Richard Carapaz and the composition that we could build around Richard to, do a great Tour de France. Unfortunately, Richard crashed out first stage of the Tour de France, and everything went out the window there. Of course, we still had a great performance from Nielsen getting that polka dot jersey for a little while there. But what do you see this year going into the season? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to?
Well, I mean, I think that the thing that really excites me is this influx of young riders that we're having. They're not just young riders, but they're real top talents, I think. It's great to see their kind of modern approach to their work. They're very confident people. They bring a lot of knowledge already, even though they're young. And the physical potential they have is high. And for us as coaches or sports directors, our job is really to help them fill the last pieces of the puzzle. The technical side, the tactical side, riding in this level of peloton, and that's really our job. So when we can get our hands on that and get busy with that, I think that's super rewarding for us. Beyond that, we have, I'd say, like another group of riders that are a bit further down the road than them, who we've also developed in-house, thinking about Ben Healy, thinking about Nielsen Paulus. And I think that we've done some good work with those guys, and with them we're just coming to the good bit. And that's really something to look forward to. And then beyond that, we have riders who are kind of the finished product. Alberto Bettiol, Carapaz. So we have a good range of things, and I think that there's things that we as directors can really get busy with, and that's good to look forward to.
I had a couple of the younger guys on the podcast already this week, Ben Healy and Archie Ryan. And they're also good mates, like in their bike off their life off the bike.
Yeah.
And I think that there are several of them who are friends, kind of in that circle. And it just makes me wonder, like, what an interesting opportunity it is for those young guys to just get together and race bikes with their friends, but at the highest level of sport. I mean, we've seen it in other sports now, right? Like the NBA, they had the big three with like LeBron, D Wade, and I forget the other guy's name, but it was the big three. And so do you see that kind of chemistry evolving throughout the year with the younger guys, maybe getting the opportunity to race together and building on those early years of friendship, and maybe that having some impact in the racing at the high level?
I mean, it's a well-known fact that people give more to their teammates when there's connection between them. I think that connection should be real, so it's not something that we force upon them. I think that in a group of 30 riders, not everybody should be friends. We should be friendly with each other, but we can work together. Trust each other and do great things even if we're not friends.
Mm-hmm.
But when, organically there are those things, I think it's really fertile ground for growth.
Right.
And in the case of Ben, I mean, he's not very old, but he's actually a great example for them.
Yeah.
He's a little bit further along. He can help them avoid making mistakes. And, those things are the best picked up in informal settings.
Right.
So he's already been in this for a while. He knows the team. He knows how the races work. So I think he can help them avoid some unnecessary mistakes and just speed the process up.
Interesting. So one of the main things I wanted to cover today was to unpack a little bit at how you look at the team composition in a race like the Tour de France. So the season starts in January. Can you walk us through the year and what you're looking for in the riders and how you kind of reach the point of making that final selection in July?
So I'd say it's essentially kind of a protracted triage process.
Okay. What does that mean?
I mean, when the route information comes out, that's already a first cut, because you see what kind of riders are going to be excluded because the route doesn't suit them that year.
Right.
From there, you make a first group, and then you have to see their progression. And then slowly, as the season evolves, we're going to figure out what are realistic goals for us. And from there, you build out a team essentially around what we think we can achieve at the race. And then you add in specific people for specific support roles to try and attain those goals. I think one thing to bear in mind with the Tour is that, unfortunately, there are so many crashes, obviously depending on the route, but there can be big crashes. So anybody you take, you have to have a plan B and C in the back of your mind that you can reconvert that rider, that he could have a chance to win a given stage if our top leader falls out, which is unfortunately what happened this year.
So run me through what you're seeing in the Tour de France this year. What do you think about the course?
It's an interesting one. It's often with the Tour de France, if you have 8 to 10 days of wall-to-wall sprints, flat stages, that can have a really locked down race. But I think that the start in Italy is already going to shift things around.
Okay.
There's quite significant time in a high altitude this year on repeated days. And essentially the key time trial comes after the mountains and not before.
Interesting.
So I think tactically that changes things, which is different, for example, compared to the Tour of Italy, where all the TTs come before the big mountains. So the top favourites are going to go to that TT, which is a hard one, loaded with fatigue.
Right.
And I think that levels the playing field a little bit from TT specialists to just the best riders who are left in the race at that stage.
If you were making predictions in December, who do you think the favorites are going into the Tour next year?
I mean, I think you can pick quite quickly the names of those riders who on paper are a level ahead. It's Pogačar, Vingegaard, Roglic. Behind them, there's quite a large group of riders who are quite close, who could be competitive, but I think, it's quite a tight race with those guys, but a lot can happen in those races.
And where do you think somebody like Carapaz falls in there?
I mean, his pedigree is out there for everybody to see. He's one of the few people to have won a 3-week race in the last few years, outside of that elite group. We're aware of how high the bar is, but I think he's got the capacity to do it. We'll see over the spring how he comes out of the winter, but so far, knock on wood, he's having a good winter compared to last year, and we all know that that's really the basis of the season that comes up. So we're optimistic.
Yeah, his ride at Lombardia was pretty impressive. Although he didn't get the big result at the end of the day. Is like if you look at his performance and the 30-minute time trial he did there to get back to the first group, his form was something spectacular at Lombardia.
Yeah, and he didn't come to that block of races with a big base of racing kilometers or even training. So I can't say that was honestly the best version of Richard. He did a lot of work to get there, but he didn't have, consistent racing due to his injuries. So I think that result was like a snapshot of what we've got in our hands, and it's a high quality cyclist. It
seems like the opportunity for Richard at the Olympics this year, they're not as high. I mean, it's a bike race at the end of the day. You never know how it's going to go, but it seems like with the Olympics favoring the sprinter this year, in theory, or somebody like Van der Poel or Van Aert or whatever, one of the superstars, it seems like the Tour de France would be a race like Carapaz would really go all in on. Do you think Carapaz is a rider that can win the Tour?
I think in the right circumstances, in the right race, route-wise and so on, he's got all the cards that you need to do that, and he's got the experience of having done it.
Right.
So if things fall right, he can win a 3-week race for sure.
What about like amount of race days for Carapaz this year. It looked like last year, like he didn't really race a lot before the tour, and then he was injured. And so, of course, he didn't get a lot of race days after his injury. But are you guys considering the approach that was taken last year with Carapaz and looking at more race days going into this season, or sticking to the same system?
Last spring already, he didn't ever really get the continuity that he needed. So he had to come in late because of the complications around his tonsil operation. And then he had allergy problems, which is often a problem with South Americans in Europe because there's kind of different vegetation and so on. And then we were faced with the situation that if we continued kind of chasing after our tail, then you get too close to the tour.
Right.
So scheduling wise, it was tricky for him last year. And that's why, I mean, you know, the tour got interrupted. The spring was what it was. And he only got like a really solid run of races basically in September.
Yeah.
So he continued his training after the end of the races just to try and keep building that base. So I agree, you know, if we can get a nice run of races strung together for him without any hiccups, then we're already going to be halfway there.
And what do you see, you know, because you probably, I'd imagine you understate how much you oversee as far as the riders go. But what do you see in terms of percentage of riders that do better with more racing versus riders who do better with more training? Is that age dependent? You know, there's a lot of talk out there. People say, oh, the older guys, they need to race more and the younger guys need to train more. Is there any validity there? What do you see on your end in regards to that conversation?
There's quite a few factors there. I think definitely if we're talking about a high quality rider, as they get older, they got a lot of races under their belt, you know, several years. It can be harder to get into top shape as they get older. Also, the monotony of training kind of can maybe get to them. There's ups and downs with it. I think it's a lot down to the rider's personal character. But on the other hand, the races are changing a lot, and they're changing fast. So in the past, people who wanted to do well in the classics, they raced Tirreno Adriatico to get ready. But now Tirreno is a legit, pretty hardcore stage race in itself.
Right.
So the risk is that if you use those races in the wrong way for preparation, you're going to come out of it worse than you were at the beginning. So less and less riders race themselves into shape, because you may have the physical capacity to do that race and improve. But if you get to the start and, I don't know, 30 or 40 of the 150 riders at the start have come there direct from an altitude training camp and are aiming for that race, the level is so high that if you don't have the shape, you're just going to get worse in the races rather than getting better. So that's really something to bear in mind. And obviously, just to state the obvious, compared to training in a race, the workload is completely out of your hands. You know, when you've had enough for the day, you can't just turn the bike around and go and have a shower.
Right.
So I think with high-level riders, they can do it. You know, we have riders who are quite advanced in their career and they want to race a lot. But I think you can also go, frankly, too far in the opposite direction, and then every race becomes a peak.
Okay.
And there is also a technical element to the racing. You know, if you want to win, you need to be practiced at contesting finals and making decisions and deciding who to follow, and also knowing your rivals. And if you're constantly coming in cold from, you know, extended periods of altitude training, you're basically ring rusty. So
right.
you've got to hit that balance.
Fascinating. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I were thinking of just two examples that come to my mind straight away of what you just described, and doing a really good job of staying within your limit, approaching your key races, let's say, like you said, the classics. This year, I think we can really look at Jonas Vingegaard's approach to the Tour de France, the races leading up. He didn't win all of them. He was there, but as soon as things went above that certain limit, he really did a good job of keeping things in check and not breaking his body down going into the Tour. And then we saw Matteo van der Poel race the Tour de France like a training ride, right? All in peak for Worlds. Yeah. So I think it takes not only a certain level of fitness to be able to race a race like the Tour de France as a training ride, but also a certain level of discipline, right? Because, how hard is it to not close the gap in the breakaway, 10K to go when there's a Tour de France stage on the line?
Yeah. I mean, just to state the obvious, if you want to use a race like the Tour for training, I mean, just riding in the Gruppetto in the Tour is not easy. So that means that essentially your level is so high that it is relatively easy to without contesting certain stages, still come out of that race on top form. So I think it says a lot about the level of Van der Poel.
For sure. He's an incredible rider, no doubt. So I just have one more question for you, Mr. Wegelius. I know you're a busy guy. You got to get going. If you were to set right now in December, your main goals out for you and the team, what would you say those things would be going into the season?
I would say that I would want the cycling world to be talking about our 5 or 6 young riders at the end of the year. I would want us to have a great tour, the tour that we deserve. That's not just to put everything on bad luck, but I think we really did deserve more than we got last year. And I'd like people to be thinking of our team as the team of the future, because I think that's what we're building at the moment. So if we can see even some shoots coming out of the ground with these young riders, some signs that we're on the right way, I'd be really pleased with that. And then I'd love to see the team replicate the approach that we had this year, which was that we won a lot of races, but also with a really broad spread of riders. I think we won 26 or 27 races, but I think we're also amongst the teams that won with the biggest number of riders. And I think that says a lot about the approach that we have, both, in the preparation that we do for the races, but also how we operate tactically.
Yeah, I think it speaks across the whole team. I'd agree with that. And I am super excited to see how everybody does this year. The new riders, they just kept popping up on social media, and I was really excited to see the composition start to come together. And I was asking around, I'm like, who's in charge of signing these guys? Because this doesn't seem...
That's JV.
Very, very standard EF, but JV's got a lot of smart people whispering in his ear, and those whispers turn into contracts at the end of the day, right? So it's pretty cool to see what's come together, and I'm certainly excited to be happy to be a part of it and happy to watch it unfold. So that's all we have time for today. Charlie, thanks so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on.
Thanks for having me.
And my pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, guys, don't forget to leave us a thumbs up, a favorite on this episode. Your support helps us share this message with more cyclists just like you who want to learn more about the sport. And we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you very much for your time. Until next time, I'm Zack Morris.